Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Hosts Jean and Tim, along with team members
Teresa, Linda, and Annie,
are master gardener volunteers for New York's Columbia and Greene counties. So if you're interested in gardening or nature, or nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, settle in. Enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we have something to say.
Hi, and welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. I'm Teresa Golden.
And I'm Jean Thomas. We have Carolyn Keogh with us today, and we're going to talk about the fascinating place that is the New York State Historic Site of Olana. Welcome, Carolyn.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. Before we start talking about Olana, let's learn a little about you. Why don't you fill us in about your background and how you came to be involved with Olana? You're not actually an employee of the state, but of the Olana Partnership. Am I correct? Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for the Olana Partnership. I'm the Director of Education and Public Programs. So I have the unique thrill and opportunity to work with all of our public programs, field trips, public tours. And I work for the Olana Partnership, as I said, which is the nonprofit that works in really close collaboration with New York State. So as you mentioned, Olana is a New York State historic site. And we work with the site to offer all of the interpretive programs, offerings for the public. And so we've worked with them for many, many years, which has been a beautiful partnership. My role is really exciting because it really is kind of the peak of what I would say is a dream job. So I was trying to say it more eloquently, but I think that that's the best way of putting it. I worked for many years in museum education, primarily in art museums. So I started my career at the Guggenheim. I was there for about a decade. And I was so lucky to work with youth audiences, teen audiences, teachers, and I was always kind of interested in thinking about how we could tie Frank Lloyd Wright and his design into Central Park right across the street. And so I think when I started working at the Olana Partnership, it afforded me an opportunity to tie some of these ideas of art and design with the park, with the outdoors, with nature. And so I've just been so thrilled working at Olana because I've learned so much about ecology, about gardening, about beekeeping, about all these things that, I didn't get to do working at museums in New York City, but it's been a really wonderful kind of expansion in how to work with the public and how to work with youth audiences and audiences of all ages.
That sounds like such a fun job.
Yeah, it's a dream job.
So as neighbors to Olana, we get to admire it whenever we cross over the Rip and Winkle Bridge from Greene County. Can you give us a bit of the history of the place? And I know it's a symbol of the Great Hudson Valley School of Art and the home of Frederic Church, but it seems to be so much more than some artist's house.
Yeah, it is so much more than a house. Olana is in itself a work of art. It's 250 acres of designed landscape, and that's something that we're often trying to really get folks to understand, is that this site is a work of art in and of itself. It's almost like an earthwork. I think when we think about Olana, I always think of it in the context of an artist's vision. It was a design over the span of over 40 years. It started with a purchase of farm property. Church was an artist living and working in New York City. He was newly married. I think he was about 30. But in 1860, he purchases the first parcel of land, which was a farm, Winston Breezy Farm. He purchases this parcel. It's about 126 acres, and that's where he lives with his wife, Isabel, for a majority of the beginnings of their marriage. And then over the next 40 years, he acquires about 7 additional parcels and designs these 250 acres. He puts in a man-made lake, over 5 miles of carriage roads, and then towards the latter half of the project, he builds the main house, the historic house at the very top of the hill. And so I think when folks come to Olana, oftentimes, affectionately, I think people call it the castle or, the mansion, but it's so much more than that. And I think that that's something that we're so excited to be able to share with people. The house itself, I think, was for Church a viewing mechanism for the landscape. If you've ever been to the house, there are these beautiful windows, these kind of portals to the outside. And for Church and his family, I think that's how the house functioned. It was a way to engage with the outdoors and a way to kind of look out onto the views.
Okay, before we settle into a deeper exploration of Olana, and we will, let's
Can
look
you
at...
tell I can't, I'm chomping at the bit? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's so much. Let's look at how Olana and the National Historic Site at the Thomas Cole House across the river are connected, and we've got the Hudson River Skywalk going on in between, which we used to just think was a bridge. And it's a feast of art and history and like literally a new perspective, like you were saying, that they consider their house a viewing mechanism on what constitutes a landscape. The two sites are sort of separate but equal, right? One's state and the other's federal, and sometimes they collaborate on projects and sometimes not. What's that relationship?
The Thomas Cole site is a National Historic Site, as you mentioned. We are also a national landmark, which is really exciting. So we do have that national designation as well. But what is so exciting is that while we're two separate sites, two separate entities, we are joined by the Hudson River Skywalk, as you mentioned. So there really is this through line and this thread that connects us. As you've mentioned, we've partnered over the years for exhibitions like River Crossings, which was, I think, the first before my time, but a wonderful show that kind of kicked off this really concrete collaboration. And then more recently, Cross-Pollination, which I was so fortunate to get to work on. And that was a wonderful opportunity for us to extend an invitation for visitors to kind of come to Olana, come to the Hudson River Skywalk, go to the Thomas Cole site, see the whole thing. We work really closely with the Thomas Cole site for those sorts of exhibitions, but just collegially. We just had some folks who work with field trips over at Olana to host a conversation, because I think in the public's mind, rightfully so, we are so interconnected. Church got his start at the Thomas Cole site. He was living in Catskill. He was studying with Thomas Cole. Thomas Cole is instrumental to Church's growth and development as an artist. And so I think the more we can get visitors to experience both sites, whether they're walking on the Hudson River Skywalk or driving it or just looking at it, it's really integral to understanding the bigger picture and understanding the story, because I think that connection is huge. Yeah.
And the combination of the two really makes this whole area a destination. And that's the other thing that's really nice. Yeah. It's not just a day trip. It actually is, you hang out for a weekend.
Absolutely. And by design, when the Hudson River Skywalk was designed and established, that was part of the goal for folks to say this was an important site of American art. Come and explore it fully.
Okay, so let's head back up the hill to Olana and trying to figure out where to start. So let's talk about the actual house. You talked about it could be a castle, it could be a mansion. How do you actually describe it?
I'm currently developing a course curriculum for Vassar's Lifelong Learning Institute, and I have one session in the course, and it's titled A Family Home or a Work of Art. And I think that that's a way of thinking about the whole site of Olana and the house. It was a typical Victorian home. A family lived there. There were 4 teenagers living there at one point. When you go inside, it has typical Victorian living spaces. There's an entry room, there's a parlor. But I think it was so much more than that, because I think, like I mentioned, it was a viewing mechanism, and it was a space designed by an artist and lived in by his family, who had a deep affinity with the natural world. The Hudson River was so integral for Church, not only as an artist, but I think as a person. He had gotten his start with Thomas Cole, studying in Catskill. And so for him, I think the house really was a way for him to connect with the landscape. If you've ever been inside the main house, the central view, the main window, looks out onto a space called the Ombra, which I joke, but it's true, is my favorite room in the house. It's kind of an outdoor porch, not really a room at all, but it's an outdoor area, flanked by this beautiful arch inspired by Middle Eastern design. And that's where he put his desk, looking out onto that western view so that he could see the Catskills, see the Hudson River. And that was the view that I think he wanted to see.
How did he get any work done?
Great question. And he wasn't a real diarist. He wasn't a journal keeper. And in his letters, he wasn't the most verbose. He wasn't like Thomas Cole in that regard. Thomas Cole had these beautiful essays and would go on, make speaking arrangements. And Frederic Church wasn't like that. But he did do these personal studies and these personal paintings of the sunsets and the sunrises at Olana. And I think from that really informs how I see the house as a kind of way to commune with nature, a way to see the outdoors and to live amongst it.
And the design of the house was Persian?
He said that he wanted to build a Persian-style home. He had never been to Persia. But the house has origins in a really integral trip that he and his wife Isabel took. In 1867, they acquired the top of the site. So the parcel where the house was built, they had purchased it, and it was a woodlot. So previously it had been a woodlot. He buys that piece of land. He has an original plan for the house, kind of like a chateau style, more European inspired. He goes on this journey through Europe, goes to Italy, goes to parts in the Holy Land. So he goes to Jerusalem, Damascus, Beirut. And when he comes back, he scraps the original plan entirely. And he says that he wants to design, quote unquote, a Persian style home. But what's interesting is that some of the really integral design elements come from some of the houses that he and Isabel stayed in. So his wife was really drawn to some of the full stone structures that they stayed in. You can see some of that in the stone that was used for the house. They were really inspired by some of the open air structures that they stayed in. And while you don't have an open air area, the court hall, which is the center room in the home, kind of emulates that structure. So there's a lot of resonance with some of the places they visited, even though he called it, quote unquote, Persian.
So they kind of built a souvenir.
What a wonderful way of putting it. Yes. And they brought back souvenirs too. I mean, the whole house is just adorned with ephemera and all of these items that they picked up and brought back. And so, yes, it's one big souvenir.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, the grounds are an education in themselves. How many acres?
250.
250. And that's beside the fact that the view is world famous, of course. Full disclosure, by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier when we were talking. Our fellow master gardener volunteer, Glenda Berman, volunteered there for, several years. And
yes,
she's an asset to anything she does.
Can we take a moment for me to just say how much I love Glenda? Yeah, we miss her
Please
dearly.
Do. Yeah. Yeah, she's wonderful. And there's been a huge investment recently by the state in restoration and improvements on the grounds and such. I was thinking, when you're talking about, he took 240 acres and decided to rearrange it.
There's this misconception that Olmsted designed Olana.
I keep hearing that.
No, he did not. It was all church. So I'm happy to be here and set the record straight.
Yeah, all Olmsted did was those little things like Central Park.
Only Central Park.
Yeah. Little stuff like that.
But what's interesting about Olana and about Church is that Central Park, he was very closely involved with Central Park. He was a commissioner at the park. He cited the obelisk. So he was responsible with that, and they actually awarded him a very small obelisk trophy in honor of him working on that project, which is sitting in his studio inside the house. So what you're pointing out is this kind of connection with this larger milieu about landscape architecture, landscape design. I mean, as much as Church wasn't a writer or letter writer, there is one letter that he wrote where he said, "I'm busy landscape architecting." So that was very much part of the ethos for Church and for his circle, obviously.
So what is the state doing with this?
Oh, yes. So currently we have a huge project underway that has been really well funded and well supported by the state. And we've been working with the state, the Olana Partnership, to raise funds to put together a new visitor center. And it's been, I would say, one of the largest building projects on the site since Church was alive. We are going to be opening the visitor center this year. It's the Frederic Church Center for Art and Landscape. And basically it's designed as a very modest welcome center. So the idea is that folks will come and they will have a new orientation area. They'll come and they'll be able to park, kind of get situated. And if you haven't been to the site before, it'll give you an opportunity to kind of figure out where you are, use a restroom, figure out what the site is, and really give people an opportunity to see the site as a holistic work of art first. So you'll go to this visitor center at the base of the site before you just go straight to the main house, which I think is how 90% of visitors currently visit the site.
So the site's actually operated as a state park,
yes,
where hiking and birding activities can be significant. But I suspect attendance is an important metric. So what kind of numbers do you see in attendance? And as a state park, is admission free? Because I hear there's a new Third Thursday thing going on.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I would love to tell you about all these things. I'll just start by saying we are absolutely free, 365 days out of the year, open 8 a.m. to dusk. So anytime anyone wants to come have a picnic, take a walk with their dog, meet up with friends, take photos, whatever they want to do. We are free and open to the public, and that is central to our mission. So I think part of what the Olana Partnership does with New York State is we are both really aligned in this mission of being open, accessible to the public.
Is parking free?
Parking is free.
Okay. Somebody was worried about that. I was talking about
Well,
it
let me
earlier.
tell you, not only is parking free, but we have 2 new parking facilities as part of some of our capital projects that we've done this year, and both have EV chargers as well. So
I can
come
go.
park, charge, have a picnic, make yourself at home. I mean, my message is always, Olana is yours. You know, it was Frederic Church's vision, but now it's a New York State park, so it's owned by all of us. So that's the first thing. Attendance, we're very lucky in that we have a lot of folks coming through our proverbial doors. During COVID, we had a huge increase of attendance, but we see about 200,000 visitors a year, 300,000. It really depends. COVID was a higher period, but we see, I would say, one of the higher numbers of visitors in our general park region. So yeah, we have quite a few visitors coming through our doors. Third Thursdays is an exciting initiative because while the park is free and while we have free access, free parking all year long, our tours are not free. Our tours do have an admission fee. So if you want to get inside the house or if you want to go on a landscape tour to learn more about the site and about the history, we do have a charge for those. But on these Third Thursday initiatives, we are going to be offering all of our tours and programs on those days for free. So we were so fortunate this past year to receive funding from the Art Bridges Foundation to support this initiative for 3 years. So we have 3 years to offer once monthly, totally free programming, tours. So if this is your opportunity, you know, if you've been wanting to get inside the house and you want to come for free, this is the day. So we're really excited about it.
Do you have to turn people away?
Not yet. So we just started in January. Okay. So we've been kind of, not yet, but we
don't know
might.
yet. So you can make reservations?
So how it works is if you're coming to our programs have been drop-in. So you can come and just show up and we will be happy to make space for you and welcome you. A lot of what we've been doing on the programming side is drop-in art making programs for all ages. We have an exciting printmaking workshop inspired by some of the printed advertisements that Church had to advertise some of his landmark artworks. So some of his masterworks that were really famous, he advertised quite broadly. So Heart of the Andes is a current focus of our current exhibition. And we're focusing a little bit on some of those printed materials. But we'll also be doing a program called The Women of Olana. It's a lunch and learn. So if you're interested in the women who have kind of maybe been lesser told and lesser talked about in this story, come on by. Allegra Davis, who's our associate curator, is going to be telling us all about Isabel, who's Church's wife, Downey, Church's daughter, and the ways in which their stories are really important to the Olana history as well. Tours are, you show up and you can book a tour on site day of. So you can't book in advance, but the idea is that come, we'll assign you on a tour based on, when it's most available. So first come, first serve.
I just wanted to add another local bit of interest. In the town of Catskill, there's a historic house called Beatty Powers House. The grounds are officially a town park, but I kind of think that they're part of a triangle of historical art things where Olana participates with the Coal House with a lot of projects, but you also participate with projects back and forth between you and the Beatty Powers House, which has one of the best views of Olana around, by the way, and is also free access. The building's only open certain hours, but the park itself, where you can go strolling and look across the river at Olana, Bob Hoven is doing a phenomenal job there. Their emphasis is on music and I guess art as well, a lot of different arts.
You're bringing to mind something that we haven't talked about yet, which is the views, the view shed, the view back at Olana, and some of the views, just how important the views are. And so sites like Beatty Powers Place and other sites are so important to that. I mean, so much of the work that we do is not only related to programming, which is my bread and butter, so I'll talk about that till I turn blue in the face, but my colleagues and I also work closely with viewshed advocacy, so thinking about how we're protecting the views from Olana. And sites like Beatty Powers are important in that regard, right? Because that is a site that will not be developed and will kind of keep the view as close to what Church was seeing from Olana when he was there sketching. So I think, we don't have anything lined up right now in terms of programming, but always open.
I'm thinking all these healthy people that go do hiking around and stuff like that, and they hike up and down the mountain happily and across the bridge, I think the bridge is a mile long.
I think it's 3. The whole route, one way is 3.
But the bridge itself, yeah. And then you go up to the coal house, and then you go down a few blocks more, and you're at the other, and you can watch and see where you started out. Of course, then you have to realize that, I'd be saying, oh my God, I've got to go all that way back.
You can see the whole thing. But seeing Olana, it's interesting because seeing Olana from the other view, going and seeing it from other spots, it's great to see the views that visiting the site affords, visiting Olana affords. But we've done a fundraiser over the years called the Viewshed Tour, where we actually went to various sites that had views of Olana. So private homes, places that had views back towards the site. And what a unique experience. What a great way to see back.
Well, we definitely seem to be experiencing a renaissance of the region, and it's bringing a lot of attention to the wealth of artistic talent, drawn specifically to the beauty of the Hudson Valley, and in particular the Catskills. What would you like to see to further enhance these opportunities and take advantage of all the resources that we've got here?
What a question. What a question. I think something that is always on my mind is accessibility. Is accessibility, affordability, making sure things feel inclusive, with all of the things happening in our region and everything that's happening in terms of the growth of our region. I think that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about Third Thursdays as an initiative, and why I'm just so thrilled that Olana is free and parking is free, because I think it's important for these sites like Thomas Cole, like Olana, like Claremont, these really important sites to our history as a state, and also to our experience of nature and of this really important, beautiful part of our country. I think it's important for those places to remain accessible and to remain inclusive, because I think as this renaissance happens, the last thing that I would ever want is for folks to feel like these places aren't theirs. These places are all of ours. And I think that that's something that, I bring to everything that I try to do at Olana, is to make people feel welcome. So I don't know if that's a real answer to your question, but it's something that came to mind when I was thinking a little bit about that, is with everything that we have happening and all of these amazing changes in the region, I think it's also important to really make sure that we're all kind of including everybody in those changes. Yeah.
Well, amen. That's wonderful. From your unique perspective, what gives you hope for the future? And I think you kind of just answered that you are aiming toward inclusion.
I think that doing that work gives me hope. I think there's so much more work to be done. And I think that ever-growing list of how we can kind of continue to try and be more inclusive, to continue to try and welcome more people to the site, try and expand this story and showcase how Olana is a site, not just necessarily of the story of Frederic Church, but also a story of the folks who lived on the site before him, a story of us now living and engaging with the site and the ecology contemporaneously. That work does give me hope. And I know we're running tight on time, but I'll just share a little kind of preview into a project that we've been working on that has been giving me a lot of hope, which we have been working in advancement of an exhibition that's opening in the spring and summer. It's going to be focusing on Church's memorial landscape, so the ways in which he used his landscape paintings to memorialize lost loved ones. And we're also thinking about how landscapes can just be a source of refuge and solace for us all. And as part of that project, we're going to be doing an audio project, bringing on community voices, the voices of our supporters, of people for whom Olana is really important. And right now, my colleagues and I are in the thick of interviewing people, collecting testimonials, and going through some of those stories and hearing people's testimonials about what Olana means to them. Boy, that gives me hope. I'm sitting at my computer, editing audio on GarageBand, sobbing. And it's been really meaningful just to hear that folks of all different walks of life, for whom Olana means many, many different things. And that gives me hope that this is a place that came from one man's vision, but can mean a lot of different things for every single one of us.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Carolyn. This is really delightful.
Lovely to be here.
That concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank Sandra Powers and Devin Connolly from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties for production support. And a special thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenmgb@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Counties Facebook page. For more information about Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties, visit our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org or visit us in Hudson or in Acre. Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal programming and employment opportunities